Good afternoon. My name is Barton Bott. I am from PassTheNCMHCE.com, a website where we provide live workshops and on-demand videos to help you pass the NCMHCE exam. Today, we're going to take a look at an overview of the NCMHCE exam. So let me share my screen and bring up this little PowerPoint here. Okay, I'm going to leave it up just like that, and so we could easily go through the slides. So again, overview of the NCMHCE exam. First off, let's take a look at the description of the exam. Basically, it's 11 case studies designed to replicate actual work of a clinician working with a client, and it's over a couple of different sessions. Typically, it starts at intake, and then there's another session, and then a final session. So 3 sessions altogether, and that final one usually coincides with a termination point or something close. The case studies are designed to capture an examinee's ability to identify, analyze, diagnose, develop, and implement plans for treatment of clinical concerns, or basically be a clinician. Each case study includes one narrative and approximately 9 to 15 questions. And we'll see why I said approximately 9 to 15 in a moment. The content that's measured is as follows. What we see here are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 areas. 5 areas of content. These 5 areas are referred to as domains. Okay, domains. And we see professional practice and ethics, intake assessment and diagnosis, treatment planning, core counseling skills and interventions, and core counseling attributes. If you go to this website right here, this hyperlink, that'll take you to the NBCC, and you could look at a greater in-depth explanation of each of the domains. Basically, the weight of each domain, that is how much emphasis is placed on each one, which also coincides with how many questions there are in regard to each domain, are as follows. Domain 1, professional practice and ethics, 10 to 20% of the exam. Intake assessment and diagnosis, 20 to 30% of the exam. Oh, wait, I thought I said there were 5 domains. Well, there are 5 domains that were tested on. That is content-wise. Domain 3, areas of clinical interest, you'll see 0, no questions, no percent of items, because that is the exam itself. That is the material that we are presented with that we have to resolve, and or shall we say the case study that we have to look at, analyze, and such, and answer the questions associated with that study. Okay, so again, we start out with ethics, ethical concerns, go to intake assessment and diagnosis, naturally following treatment planning, counseling skills and interventions, which is 25 to 35% of the exam, the largest section. And hey, that's the one that also includes interventions. Yes, interventions based on the various theoretical knowledge requirements, right? And when I say theories, I'm talking psychodynamic, Adler, solution focused, acceptance and commitment, motivational interviewing, person centered, and the like, and all of their associated interventions. And then it wraps up with core counseling attributes. That pretty much corresponds to basic attending skills, that course that most of us started our graduate program with. Okay, so again, 10 to 20%, 20 to 30% for intake. That's a pretty good section. Treatment planning, 10 to 20. Counseling skills and interventions, 25 to 35. And then core counseling attributes, another 10 to 20. What we have actually seen based on feedback from all the people who have taken the exam, it's been over 2 years now that they've been using this format, they go right down the middle, meaning there are 15 questions associated with domain 1, 25 with domain 2, 15 with domain 4, 30 questions in regard to domain 5, counseling skills and interventions, and then another 15 with core counseling attributes. The actual level of knowledge requirements associated with each domain are as follows. In domain one, now we're not going to read all of them, but just give you an example. It's professional practice and ethics. Okay, so what they're looking at is a client, rather a clinician's ability related to proper admin and clinical protocols as driven and defined by the ACA ethics. So we see things such as review payment fees and insurance benefits, explain counselor agency policies, review client records, advocate for professional and client issues, supervision, clarify counselor client roles, all things which are covered in the ACA ethics. That is the guidelines, again, that drives the industry. When we go to intake assessment and diagnosis, well, that shouldn't be much of a surprise because you're all pretty much working as interns now, and you're doing this every day. So what we look at there are basic tools, processes, and such that you would typically expect to either do and or see during intake assessment and diagnosis, such as a information gathering tool, biopsychosocial. How about also the conduction of a diagnostic interview? That would be where we would essentially do our diagnosing. The conduction of cultural formulation interview, the CFI, that's provided to us in DSM-5, right? First time we've had that. And other things that we might expect to do during intake, such as assess for substance use, obtain client self-reports, evaluate dynamics and such, interrelational dynamics, such as if we were seeing a couple. Again, domain 3, areas of clinical focus, well, that's the test. And what, only A to F? Oh no. Areas of clinical focus have many more. Now, I'm not going to, again, read all these out, but we go all the way from A to Z, and then it starts again AA to AX. And sure, it's going to be a lot because these are the problems that are typically brought to us as clinicians. These are the people that walk in the door, and these are some of the problems that they have to deal with, and we help them resolve. When we get back down to treatment planning, it's sort of relatively short in regard to level of knowledge requirements as it goes from A to P, not the entire alphabet. And again, it is a little less than intake, which is 25 to 30%. Here, we see 10 to 20%, okay? Smaller section. But then our next session, or rather section, domain 5, that's the big one. That really is the big one. And quite honestly, it's the one that most people have difficulty with because it does cover all of the various interventions with mostly all of the various theoretical orientations and or theories. Again, psychodynamic, existentialism, ACT, person-centered, CBT, REBT, and the like. And you could see that and might expect that domain 5, as such, is going to have many knowledge requirements. And you can see improve interactional patterns, address cultural considerations, address addiction issues, apply theory-based counseling interventions, facilitate trust and safety, build communication skills. And for each of these level of knowledge requirements, the questions will be, how are we going to do that? Or we do it within the body of the narrative, and then it'll say, what did you just do? Such as demonstrate empathic attunement or something such as that. Then we go to the last domain. Well, again, a lot of material with domain 5, A to Z, and then AA all the way down to AW. And then the last one wraps up core counseling attributes. Seems to be relatively short, okay? We go A to M. And what do we see here? Things such as genuineness, congruence. No, there's that empathic attunement, empathic responding, non-judgmental stance, positive regard. Hell, if you didn't know I was talking about something specifically different than a theory, you might think I was describing person-centered therapy. But remember, the key thing here is that when you use empathy, when you are congruent, those are skills all counselors should have, regardless of their theory. However, when we apply them as direct interventions, then we're using person-centered, right? So kind of a little play on words there, but it is a distinct difference. So anyway, that's kind of the body of the 5 domains that are tested. Okay. Again, I would go back to that website, the NBCC page where we gave you the hyperlink if you wanted to see all of the content and such. Now, the exam itself consists of 130 to 150 questions. All questions are multiple choice, A, B, C, or D. Only one correct answer, A, B, C, or D. So you might say, well, if I don't know the answer and guess, well, heck, you have a 25% chance. And unlike the old format, there's no points taken off when you pick a wrong answer. You only get credit for the correct answers on your test, however many you got correct out of the 100 items that are scored. Again, 130 to 150 questions, of which only 100 are scored. The other questions are trial questions. That's how we get new questions to add to the exam bank. The way it's broken down, again, I said, we start out usually with an intake and we get the setting, get some background information, demographics and such, and then the presenting concerns and diagnosis. Then there's a clinical session, which could be 2 sessions later, 3 sessions later, sometime after intake. And then finally, a third section or session, which could be and typically is close to termination, but it could be 2 months down the road from the time you had intake. That variance from intake to termination and the varying amounts of time in each narrative or question is what enables the exam to actually evaluate the full depth and breadth of the entire K-CREP program, right? All of the counseling requirements and knowledge, because the scenes will shift. It's not like you go session 1, 2, 3. No, the time frame varies. Okay. Now, you probably heard me just say in the intake, you also get a diagnosis. So if the diagnosis is provided, do you still have to study the DSM-5? Well, yes, you do. And why? Because although the diagnosis is provided, during the exam, you may be asked to evaluate how that judgment was made, and maybe sometimes with questions such as knowing what the diagnosis is, which of the following would be indicative of that diagnosis? Like, example, antisocial personality, lack of empathy, right? Typical characteristic in antisocial. Then also, additionally, you could be asked to provide co-occurring diagnoses, or you may need to change the diagnosis. And a question like that might be, based on the new information just provided, what would be the best revised diagnosis? Okay. And, so you're going to get questions. And another time you may get asked about knowing what the diagnosis is. What are the differentials for that diagnosis? So you do have to still know DSM-5. Now, do you have to know it from cover to cover? No, because the intent of the exam is for an entry-level clinician. So I always say that you should focus on the most commonly seen diagnoses, which is really based on the degree of prevalence that you would see, in society itself, like the percentage of people that might be bipolar, the percentage of people that have anxiety, depression, and the like. And that'll give you a clue as to, what are the key diagnoses really to study. The exam structure itself, okay, I already said it had 11 case studies. Let's break it down a little further. Out of the 11 case studies, 10 of them are scored, right? 10 of them are scored. So one of the case studies is going to be a trial, right? They're trying out a new narrative, new questions and the like. And then if it falls within their desired parameters, it'll be added to the exam bank. And again, that's how the exam bank gets built up. Out of the 11 case studies, 10 of them are scored, right? 10 of them are scored. Now, the items in each case study, I mentioned just a moment ago, it could be anywhere from 13 to 15. And the little asterisks here say, a little note here, is that at various places on the website, one time they say there's 13 questions, and there's 14. From the feedback over the last 2 years, right? From the feedback over the last 2 years, the total items on a test typically are at least 143 and up to 150, no more than 150. Okay. And the scored items, again, will be 100. As such, if there's 143 questions, 100 are scored, 43 aren't. But you don't know which ones are being scored, so you got to do your best on all of them. Now, the passing score. To pass the test, your score must be at or above the cut score. Okay, the cut score, such as if you correctly answered 64 questions out of the 100 that were graded, and the minimum score or cut score, if you would, were 62, then you would have passed the exam. However, if the cut score was 67, you would have missed passing by 3 points. So, why does the score change from exam to exam? Because each exam is a little bit different, and the degree of difficulty for each question is determined when they make the exam. Computer does this, the degree of difficulty. As such, one exam might have 10 narratives that are being scored that are a little harder than this other exam is 10 narratives that are being scored. So the one that has the easier ones would have a higher score, passing score. The ones that have the harder narratives or more difficult would have a lower passing score. And that entire process, you see, it doesn't sound fair, but actually it is fair, because everybody has an equal chance of passing. The guy with the easier test isn't going to have a better chance than the guy with the hard test. No, it's going to be balanced because the cut score will vary. That process, equal chance, well, that process is referred to as equating. Okay, equating. And basically, the way I described it is how it works. But again, you can look at, go to the NBCC website and read about it. Sometimes it's a little confusing, but basically, the degree of difficulty is predetermined before the exam is administered, and each exam will have its own individual cut score. Here's an example of the different categories, and these would be the domains, right? The 5 domains: professional practice and ethics, intake, treatment planning, counseling skills and interventions, and core counseling attributes. And you could see, just as I said, we had the professional practice and ethics cut off a little bit, but intake, how many questions were there? 25. Treatment planning, 15. Counseling skills and interventions, 30. 30% of the test. And then core counseling attributes, 15. You add up those numbers, you come up with 100 scored items. On this particular exam, the score required to pass was 61. The cut score, or rather the score for this individual, regrettably, was below that. So, in fact, they didn't pass this test. And then when they give you this sheet, which if you take it live, go to a test center, you get this right away. They also break it down further in regard to the different K-CREP areas that the questions may have been associated with. But again, keep in mind that these are the domains those questions fell into, although they are covering all of these various different knowledge requirements, such as professional counseling, human growth and development, career, counseling and helping relationships, group counseling, question on assessment and testing. Okay, so and a total again of 100 questions. How long does it take to do this exam? Well, they give you 255 minutes, 4 hours and 15 minutes. Yeah, believe me, your butt's going to be sore when you get done taking this test. Okay. But 225 minutes, that is 3 hours and 45 minutes, is the actual amount of time you will have to answer questions. 5 minutes in the beginning is for the non disclosure agreement. 10 minutes is for a tutorial. This is how the computer works, and you'll answer questions and such on the computer. And then there is a 15-minute break after the fifth case study. Whenever you get to it, you might take 2 hours to get to it, another person might take an hour. Whenever you get to that case study, number 5, and finish it, your 15-minute off the clock break starts. And then once that 15 minutes is up, the clock starts again. Now, does that mean you can't take another break if you really got to go bad? No, you could, but the clock's not going to stop. So you have to really gauge your time, and kind of stay on track, right? Because there have been many people that have reported they didn't finish the exam because there is a lot of reading in these three different within the narrative, the three different sections, a lot of reading, and then all the questions. And the difficulty with the questions is what people have said is how the questions are phrased and or answered. So, however you study and whatever tools you may use, really important to understand how to break down the questions and also to practice doing narratives just to get used to all of the reading. Now, special accommodations are granted on a case by case situation. And for those of you that, might fall into any of these situations as defined by the ADA Disability Act, an impairment, English as a second language, possibly religious beliefs accommodations, or where you need a little more confidentiality, and everything that anybody that submits for accommodations, of course, it's kept confidential. And even if they say no, you can always appeal it. And if you want to go to this site, you go to NBCC, they give you the very specific requirements. Now, you have to ask for accommodations when you register for the exam. It's not automatic. And if you try to get them after you've got your test date, it's not going to happen. You have to do it at the same time you register for the exam. And if you have any reason to believe that you might be justified to have accommodations, you should definitely take them. Take whatever time they're willing to give you. Okay. And again, go here and read it. Just read it. And then you'll see if possibly you might fall into one of those slots. And where do you take the test? Well, you can take it in test centers and online, right? Test centers and online. And the people go, what? Take it online? How can I do that? Yeah, that means you can actually take it at home. Okay. There are some very specific requirements that have to be met, like they'll scan the room with your camera and such. You can't talk to anybody while you're taking the test. You can't be looking down like you were looking at notes. It's pretty strict. Some people have loved it because it's alleviated a lot of the anxiety of going to a test center, and others have hated it. It's really case by case. But in any case, you go to pearsonview.com for a test center, and you go to pearsonview.com CCE on view to register to take it online. And that's really it. That's a basic overview. And I would ask that if you have any um, trouble preparing or you're looking for help to prepare, please visit our website, see all the current and upcoming live workshops that we conduct, as well as all of our on-demand videos. We have quite a lot of on-demand videos covering all of the various content areas and such. And they're all designed to help you pass the NCMHCE exam. Just visit us at passthencmhce.com and let us help you pass the first time. Let's get the test done and behind you. and then you'll never have to take another test again. It'll all be done by CEUs after that. Now, if you have any questions and you'd like to write to us, please feel free to write to me if you'd like. I'm Barton again, and my email is barton@pass.thencmhce.com. If you have any general questions in regard to the site, content, prices, anything like that, you can always call or write to, rather, our help desk, which is help@pass.thencmhce.com. So we hope that this little video, you found it beneficial. And again, if you have questions, do not hesitate to write to us, okay? Just don't hesitate to write. And that's all we have for today. So thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you again next time.